The year was 2247, and humanity had finally reached the stars. They had colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. They had built great ships that could travel between planets in days instead of years. They believed they were alone in the universe. They were wrong. Admiral Daniel Hartley stood on the bridge of the carrier Independence and watched the sensor screens with growing concern. Something massive had just appeared at the edge of the solar system, something that should not exist. "Sir, we are detecting an unknown vessel," said Lieutenant Katie Morrison. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "It is approximately 8 kilometers long. It just appeared out of nowhere." Hartley had served in the Terran Coalition Navy for 30 years. He had seen many things, but he had never seen anything like this. The ship on the screen was enormous. It was covered in strange patterns that glowed with blue light. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "They are hailing us," Morrison said. The message came through in perfect English. The voice was cold and mechanical. It said that the ship belonged to the Valorian Dominion. It said that the Dominion had ruled this part of the galaxy for 40,000 years. It said that humanity was now a subject species of the Dominion. It said that humans had 7 days to surrender their fleet and their planets. It said that resistance was not an option. Commander Ryan Douglas turned to Hartley with shock on his face. "They cannot be serious. They expect us to just give up everything we have built?" Hartley did not answer. He was thinking about his children back on Earth. He was thinking about the billions of people who had no idea what was happening. He was thinking about what it meant to be told that your entire species was now property of someone else. The news spread quickly across the solar system. The Terran Coalition called an emergency meeting of all world leaders. President Laura Bennett stood before them and asked a simple question. What should humanity do? Some wanted to surrender. They said that fighting was pointless. The aliens had technology that was thousands of years more advanced. Their ships were bigger and stronger. Their weapons were more powerful. Fighting would only lead to death. Others said that surrender was not an option. They said that humanity had not come this far to become slaves. They said that their ancestors had fought and died for freedom. They said that they would rather die on their feet than live on their knees. President Bennett listened to both sides. Then she spoke. "I have thought about this since the moment we received their message. I have asked myself what kind of people we are. I have asked myself what we owe to our children and their children, and I have found my answer." She paused and looked around the room. "We are human beings. We have survived ice ages and plagues and wars. We have climbed mountains and crossed oceans and reached for the stars. We have never surrendered to anyone. And we will not start now." The vote was taken. It was unanimous. Humanity would fight. Admiral Hartley received his orders and gathered the fleet. Every ship that could fly was called to Earth. Every man and woman who could serve was given a uniform. They knew they were outmatched. They knew they would probably lose. But they did not care. When the 7 days ended, the Valorian commander expected to find a broken species ready to submit. His name was Sovereign Kethros, and he had conquered dozens of worlds. He had never met a species that chose to fight. They always surrendered. They always understood that resistance was futile. Kethros looked at his screens and saw the human fleet arranged in formation around their planet. He was amused. These creatures had perhaps 200 ships. He had brought 500. Their technology was primitive. Their weapons were weak. This would not even be a battle. It would be an execution. "Foolish creatures," he said to his officers. "They will learn the price of defiance." Admiral Hartley watched the alien fleet approach. He knew the odds. He knew that most of his people would not survive the next few hours. But he also knew that surrender meant a fate worse than death. At least this way they would die free. "All ships, this is Admiral Hartley. In a few minutes, we will engage the enemy. Many of us will not see tomorrow. But I want you to know something. I am proud to serve with you. I am proud to call you my brothers and sisters. And I am proud to be human. Let us show these aliens what that means." The battle began at exactly noon Earth time. The Valorian ships fired first. Their weapons were like nothing humanity had ever seen. energy beams that could cut through steel like paper, missiles that moved faster than any human eye could track, shields that seemed to absorb everything thrown at them. The human ships were outgunned in every way. They fell one by one. The carrier Valor was destroyed in the first 5 minutes. The cruiser Defiant lasted 10. The destroyer Hope barely got off a single shot before it was torn apart. But humanity did not retreat. They kept fighting. They kept pushing forward. And slowly, impossibly, they began to do damage. Lieutenant Katie Morrison was the first to notice it. The alien shields were not perfect. There were moments when they flickered. Tiny gaps that lasted only a fraction of a second. She reported her findings to Hartley. "Target those gaps," Hartley ordered. "Concentrate all fire on their flagship." The human fleet focused everything they had on Kethros and his command ship. Missiles and energy weapons poured into the vessel. Most were stopped by the shields, but some got through. A little damage at first, then more. Then more. Kethros could not believe what was happening. These primitives were actually hurting his ship. He ordered his fleet to destroy them all. But it was too late. A human missile found its way through a gap in the shields and struck the power core of the flagship. The explosion was visible from Earth. Sovereign Kethros died without understanding how it had happened. When the battle ended, humanity had lost 60% of its fleet. Over 40,000 sailors were dead, but they had also destroyed 37 alien ships, including the enemy flagship. They had killed the enemy commander. They had done the impossible. Across the galaxy, the news spread like fire. A primitive species had fought back against the Valorian Dominion. A primitive species had drawn blood. A primitive species had refused to kneel. The other members of the Dominion received this news with shock and disbelief. For 40,000 years, no one had dared to resist. For 40,000 years, the Dominion had been invincible. Now everything had changed. Admiral Hartley stood on the bridge of his damaged ship and looked at the debris floating in space. He had lost so many good people today. He knew that the aliens would return with a bigger fleet and more powerful weapons. He knew that the war was just beginning. But he also knew something else. He knew that humanity would never surrender. He knew that they would fight until the last ship and the last soldier. He knew that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake when it chose humanity as its enemy. The Valorians had expected an easy conquest. Instead, they had awakened something they did not understand. They had awakened the spirit of a species that had been fighting since the dawn of time. They had awakened humanity, and humanity was angry. 3 months had passed since the first battle. 3 months of fear and preparation. 3 months of waiting for the enemy to return. And now they had come. General Nicole Harper stood in the command center on Luna and watched the sensor data with cold determination. The Valorian Dominion had sent a proper fleet this time, 2,000 warships under the command of Grand Admiral Vorath. He was considered the greatest military mind in the Dominion. He had never lost a battle in 300 years of service. "How long until they reach Earth?" Harper asked. 48 hours, replied her aide, Captain Timothy Blake. "Maybe less if they push their engines." Harper nodded slowly. She had been preparing for this moment since the day she was appointed head of Terran Strategic Command. Every factory on Luna and Mars had been working day and night. Every shipyard had been building new vessels. Every scientist had been studying the wreckage of alien ships recovered from the first battle. Dr. Samuel Green was the leader of that research effort. He was a physicist who had spent his entire career studying theoretical, faster-than-light travel. Now he was reverse engineering technology from an alien civilization. He had not slept more than 4 hours a night in 3 months. "Their technology is not magic," Green had told the War Council a week ago. "It follows the same laws of physics that we understand. They are just further along the path than we are. But we are fast learners." Human ships had been upgraded with captured alien technology. Shields that could stop energy weapons. Reactors that produced 10 times more power. Targeting systems that could track enemy movements with perfect accuracy. The fleet was smaller than before, but it was much more dangerous. But the most important development came from Lieutenant Commander Benjamin Cole. He was a tactical analyst who studied military history. He had spent weeks analyzing every piece of data from the first battle, and he had found something interesting. The Dominion fights the same way every time, Cole explained to General Harper. They line up their ships and advance in formation. They use their superior numbers and firepower to overwhelm the enemy. They have been doing this for thousands of years, because it always works. And you think we can use that against them? Harper asked. I know we can. They have never faced an enemy that fights differently. They have never had to adapt to new tactics. If we refuse to play by their rules, they will not know how to respond. Harper approved his plan. It was risky and unconventional, but it was their best chance. When Grand Admiral Vorath entered the solar system, he expected a repeat of the first battle. He expected the humans to form a defensive line around their planet. He expected to crush them with overwhelming force and then burn their world to ash. What he found instead was nothing. The human fleet was gone. Earth floated alone and undefended. Vorath was suspicious, but he pressed forward. Perhaps the primitives had finally understood the futility of resistance. Then the attacks began. Human ships appeared from behind moons and asteroids. They struck at the edges of the Valorian formation and then vanished before the enemy could respond. They targeted supply ships and fuel tankers. They crippled communication vessels and sensor platforms. They never stayed long enough for the Dominion to bring their full power to bear. Vorath was confused. This was not how battles were supposed to be fought. This was not honorable combat. This was harassment and cowardice. He ordered his captains to find the enemy and destroy them. But the human ships were fast, and they knew the solar system better than any alien invader. They used the gravity of planets to accelerate and change course. They hid in the radiation belts of Jupiter and the ice fields of Saturn. They appeared when least expected and disappeared before the enemy could react. The running battle lasted 3 weeks. The Dominion lost ship after ship to ambushes and traps. Mines hidden in the asteroid belt destroyed dozens of cruisers. Guided missiles launched from hidden platforms struck at capital ships, and every time Vorath thought he had cornered the enemy fleet, they slipped away again. Captain Megan Torres commanded the destroyer Resilience during this campaign. She was 32 years old and had been in the Navy for 10 years. She had lost her brother in the first battle. She had promised herself that she would make the aliens pay for his death. The moment came near Jupiter, when Vorath finally managed to trap the main human fleet. His forces surrounded them on all sides. There was no escape. He prepared to deliver the killing blow. All ships, target the enemy flagship and fire on my command, Vorath ordered. Torres saw what was happening. She saw that the fleet was about to be destroyed, and she made a decision that would change the course of the war. Helm. Plata jumped directly into the enemy formation, she said quietly. Her first officer, Lieutenant Andrew Parker, looked at her with shock. Captain, that will put us inside their shield perimeter. The collision alone will destroy us. I know. Torres stood up from her chair. All hands, this is the captain. I am not going to lie to you. What we are about to do will probably kill us all, but it will also cripple their flagship and save our fleet. I am proud to have served with each and every one of you. Let us show these aliens what humans are made of. The Resilience activated its faster-than-light drive and jumped directly into the heart of the enemy formation. It emerged inside the shields of Vorath's command ship. The two vessels collided with devastating force. The explosion was so bright that it could be seen from Earth with the naked eye. Captain Megan Torres died instantly, along with all 300 members of her crew. But her sacrifice was not in vain. The blast destroyed Vorath's flagship and disabled 6 nearby cruisers. The enemy formation fell into chaos. Admiral Hartley saw the opportunity and gave the order to attack. The human fleet struck the disorganized enemy with everything they had. Without their command ship, the Valorian captains did not know what to do. They had never been trained to think for themselves. They had always followed orders. The Battle of Jupiter ended with a human victory. Grand Admiral Vorath survived by escaping to another vessel, but his fleet was shattered. Over 400 Dominion ships were destroyed. The survivors retreated from the solar system in disorder. General Harper watched the enemy flee and allowed herself a small smile. They had done it again. They had beaten an enemy that should have crushed them. They had proven that technology and numbers were not everything. The name of Megan Torres became a symbol across the solar system. Her sacrifice inspired millions of people. Young men and women lined up at recruitment centers to join the fight. Factories increased their production. Scientists worked even harder to unlock the secrets of alien technology. And across the galaxy, the subject races of the Dominion heard the news. They heard that a young species had defeated the greatest military force in the known universe. Not once, but twice. They heard that the Valorians were not invincible after all. Seeds of rebellion began to sprout in the hearts of the oppressed. After thousands of years of servitude, they dared to hope that freedom was possible. The Valorian High Council met in emergency session. They had lost 2 fleets and 2 of their best commanders. The primitives from the third planet of an unremarkable star had done more damage than any enemy in 40,000 years. Something had to be done. But what they did not understand was that it was already too late. Humanity had shown the galaxy that the Dominion could be beaten. That belief would prove more powerful than any weapon ever built. The war was far from over. The Dominion still had resources beyond human imagination. They still had millions of ships and billions of soldiers. But they were no longer fighting just one species. They were fighting an idea, and ideas are very hard to kill. 2 years had passed since the first alien ship appeared in the solar system. 2 years of blood and fire and sacrifice. 2 years that had transformed humanity from a young species into a galactic power. Admiral Daniel Hartley stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the carrier Vengeance, and looked at the stars with wonder. He was no longer defending Earth. He was leading the first expeditionary fleet deep into enemy territory. He was taking the war to the Dominion. The Terran coalition had changed completely. Every resource was dedicated to the war effort. Every factory produced weapons and ships. Every citizen contributed in some way. They had no choice. They were fighting for survival. But the biggest change came from Dr. Samuel Green and his team of scientists. They had unlocked the secrets of alien faster-than-light travel. Human ships could now cross the galaxy in weeks instead of centuries. They had also improved their weapons and shields to match the enemy. In some cases, they had surpassed them. The Valorians stopped innovating thousands of years ago, Green explained. They thought they had reached perfection. They were wrong. Human creativity, combined with their technology, has produced things they never imagined. The first target of the expeditionary fleet was a world called Careth Prime. It was the homeworld of an insectoid species that had been enslaved by the Dominion over 6,000 years ago. The Careth had served as soldiers and laborers for so long that they had forgotten what freedom meant. Commander Allison Drake led the ground assault to liberate the planet. She was a Marine officer who had fought in both previous battles. She had lost many friends and she carried their memory with her into every fight. The battle for Careth Prime lasted 3 days. The Dominion garrison was strong, and they fought hard. The streets of the capital city became killing grounds. Human Marines advanced block by block, building by building, room by room. The casualties were terrible. Drake herself was wounded twice. A piece of shrapnel tore through her left arm. An energy blast burned her back. But she refused to leave the front lines. Her soldiers needed her. On the 3rd day, the last Dominion fortress fell. The enemy commander surrendered to Drake personally. She accepted his sword in the traditional manner, and then had him taken away in chains. The Careth elders came to meet her. They were old and frail. Their shells cracked and faded. They had lived their entire lives under Dominion rule. They had never expected to see this day. "Why did you come here?" the eldest asked through a translator device. "Why did your people die for us? You do not know us. We are nothing to you." Drake looked at the old alien for a long moment. She thought about the Marines who had died in the streets below. She thought about the friends she had lost in the battles before. She thought about why she was fighting this war. "Because no one should be a slave," she said simply. "Because your freedom is worth fighting for. Because that is what humans do." The Careth elder was silent for a long time. Then he bowed his head in a gesture of respect. "We have served the Dominion for 6,000 years. We have built their ships and fought their wars. We have given them everything we had. And now you come and tell us that we are free." He looked up at Drake with eyes that had seen more suffering than she could imagine. "We will not waste this gift. Tell your leaders that the Kareth stand with humanity. Our warriors will fight beside yours. Our factories will build your ships. We will not rest until the Dominion is destroyed." The alliance grew quickly after that. Other species had been watching the war from the shadows. They had seen humanity defeat the Dominion twice. They had seen the liberation of Kareth Prime, and they had started to believe that change was possible. The Morathi were a silicon-based species that lived on volcanic worlds. They had been forced to mine rare minerals for the Dominion for thousands of years. Now they began sabotaging supply depots and destroying transport ships. The Delphians were an aquatic species with brilliant minds for engineering. They had designed many of the ships that the Dominion used. Now they seized control of crucial shipyards and turned them against their former masters. The Ven were a telepathic species that had been used as spies and interrogators. Now they provided intelligence to the Allied forces, warning them of enemy movements and plans. Dr. Green worked alongside scientists from all these species. They shared knowledge freely and learned from each other. Human creativity combined with alien expertise produced breakthroughs that none of them could have achieved alone. The Horizon-class battleship was the greatest example of this cooperation. It used Kareth armor that could withstand almost any weapon. It had Morathi power systems that generated enormous amounts of energy. It had Delphian shields that could adapt to different types of attacks. And it had human weapons that were more powerful than anything the Dominion had ever faced. Admiral Hartley led the new fleet in a strike against the fortress world of Nexus 7. It was one of the most important military installations in the Dominion. Thousands of ships were stationed there. Millions of soldiers defended it. The battle lasted 9 days. Both sides took heavy losses. Human ships and alien ships fought side by side against the enemy. Kareth warriors died next to human marines on the ground. Delphian engineers worked frantically to repair damaged vessels while the battle raged around them. On the 9th day, the Dominion garrison surrendered. Nexus 7 had fallen. The impossible had happened again. Chancellor Kevin Marshall addressed the growing alliance from Earth. He had become leader after President Bennett died in a Dominion assassination attempt. He was a quiet man who rarely showed emotion, but today his voice trembled with feeling. "We did not start this war. We did not want this war. But we will finish it. Not just for humanity, not just for our allies, but for every species that has ever suffered under Dominion tyranny." He paused and looked directly into the camera. "The old order is ending. For 40,000 years, the Dominion has ruled this galaxy through fear and violence. They have enslaved billions and destroyed anyone who dared to resist. They thought they would rule forever. They were wrong. The cheers could be heard across 100 worlds. The war was far from over. The Dominion still commanded vast resources. They still had fleets that numbered in the hundreds of thousands. They still controlled most of the galaxy. But they were no longer fighting a single species. They were fighting an alliance of the oppressed. They were fighting the hope of billions who had never dared to dream of freedom. They were fighting the belief that a better future was possible. Commander Drake stood on the surface of Kareth Prime and watched the sun set over the ruined city. She thought about the price they had paid to get here. She thought about the friends who would never see this moment, and she thought about what was still to come. The Dominion would not give up easily. They would fight with everything they had. More people would die. More worlds would burn. The road ahead was long and dark, but for the first time since the war began, Drake allowed herself to hope. They had come so far. They had done things that everyone thought were impossible. They had shown the galaxy that the Dominion could be beaten. Maybe, just maybe, they could actually win this war. Victory had made the alliance bold. Perhaps too bold. They had forgotten that the Dominion still had weapons they had never used. They were about to remember. High Sovereign Malthek sat alone in his throne room on the Valorian homeworld. He was ancient beyond human understanding. He had ruled the Dominion for over 3,000 years. He had watched empires rise and fall. He had crushed rebellions that seemed unstoppable. He had always won, but this was different. These humans were different. They did not fight like other species. They did not surrender when they should. They did not accept defeat, and now they had infected other species with their madness. Half the galaxy was in rebellion. Malthex made a decision that would echo through history. He authorized the use of the Extinction Protocol. It was a weapon so terrible that it had been used only once before. A fleet of automated warships, each carrying planet-killing weapons. They were programmed to destroy every world associated with the enemy. No survivors, no mercy. The first strike hit Kareth Prime. Commander Allison Drake was on the planet when the sky turned red. She had stayed to help the Kareth rebuild their world. She had become friends with many of them. She had learned their language and their customs. She had started to think of them as family. Then the extinction ships arrived. They did not negotiate. They did not demand surrender. They simply opened fire. Drake watched in horror as the first weapon struck the capital city. The explosion was brighter than the sun. A wave of fire spread across the continent. Millions of Kareth died in an instant. "We have to evacuate," her aide shouted. "We have to get to the ships." Drake could not move. She was frozen, staring at the destruction. 3 billion Kareth lived on this planet. 3 billion beings who had trusted humanity to protect them. And now they were dying. She finally let herself be pulled toward the evacuation shuttle. They barely made it off the surface before the second weapon struck. The shuttle shook violently as the shockwave hit them. Drake looked through the window and saw the planet below breaking apart. Kareth Prime was gone. The species that had stood beside humanity, that had believed in freedom, that had finally dared to hope. They were almost extinct now. A few thousand survivors on scattered ships. That was all that remained of 6,000 years of history. The Extinction Protocol did not stop there. The automated ships spread across the galaxy, targeting every world that had joined the Alliance. The Morathi lost 2 colony worlds. The Delphians lost their primary shipyard. Billions died in a matter of days. Then the ships came for humanity. New Geneva was the largest human colony outside the solar system. 7 million people lived there. Families and children and dreams for the future. Admiral Nathan Cross commanded the defense fleet. He had 40 ships against an enemy that could not be stopped. "We need to start the evacuation immediately," said Commander Amy Brooks, his second in command. "We cannot defeat those weapons. We can only buy time." Cross knew she was right. He had studied the reports from Kareth Prime. The extinction ships were designed to destroy worlds. They did not care about enemy fleets. They simply pushed through anything in their way and fired their weapons. The evacuation began immediately. Transport ships filled with civilians lifted off from every city on the planet. They headed for the jump points as fast as their engines could carry them, but there were too many people and not enough ships. Not everyone would escape. Cross made a choice that would haunt him forever. "All ships, form up on me," he ordered. "We are going to intercept those extinction ships. We are going to delay them as long as we can." "Sir, that is a suicide mission," Brooks said quietly. "I know. But every minute we buy is another transport that escapes. Another 1,000 lives saved. Another chance for our species to survive." The Battle of New Geneva was not really a battle. It was a sacrifice. Cross and his 40 ships threw themselves at the extinction fleet. They fired everything they had. They rammed enemy vessels with their own hulls. They died one by one, ship after ship, until none were left. Admiral Nathan Cross died on his bridge, still giving orders as his flagship was torn apart. His sacrifice saved over 4 million people. The evacuation transports escaped just as the extinction weapons fired. They watched from the safety of hyperspace as New Geneva burned. 3 million people died that day. Their names would later be inscribed on a memorial that stretched for kilometers. Mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, people who had done nothing wrong except belong to a species that refused to surrender. The losses devastated the alliance. The Marathi talked about surrendering. The Delphians considered fleeing to the far edges of the galaxy. Even among humans, there were voices calling for peace at any price. General Nicole Harper refused to give in. She had lost friends in every battle of the war. She had watched worlds burn and species die. But she knew that surrender meant extinction. If we give up now, everyone who died will have died for nothing, she told the War Council. The Dominion cannot let us go. If they show weakness, their entire empire will collapse. They will hunt us to the ends of the galaxy. Our only hope is to make them stop. Not because they want to, but because they cannot continue. Dr. Samuel Green had been working on something secret since the beginning of the war. He called it the Cascade device. It was a weapon that could disable all technology within a vast radius, by disrupting the quantum fields that powered advanced systems. It will not destroy their ships, Green explained. But it will make them helpless. Weapons, shields, engines. Everything will go dark. We will have a window to strike at their heart. The problem was power. The Cascade device required more energy than humanity had ever harnessed. The only source powerful enough was a star. The device would have to be activated inside the corona of the Valorian sun. It was a suicide mission. Everyone who went would almost certainly die. Lieutenant Jason Miller volunteered immediately. He was 26 years old. He had survived 3 major battles. He had watched friends die and worlds burn, and he was tired of losing. Someone has to do it, he told his commanding officer. Someone has to end this war. I would rather it be me than someone with more to live for. The mission was planned in secret. 12 ships would carry the device and its support systems. They would have to travel through the most heavily defended region of the galaxy. They would have to avoid detection by millions of enemy sensors. They would have to reach the Valorian sun and activate the device before they were destroyed. Miller led his squadron into enemy space on a cold morning in March. They traveled for 3 weeks, hiding in asteroid fields and nebulae. They avoided patrols and slipped past defense stations. They got closer to the Valorian homeworld than any human ship had ever been. Then they were detected. The first engagement killed 8 of the 12 ships. Miller watched his friends die on his sensors. He kept going. The second engagement killed 3 more. Only his ship remained. He was alone, surrounded by enemy vessels, with the device armed and ready. His final transmission was broadcast across the entire alliance. This is Lieutenant Jason Miller of the Terran Coalition. I am about to activate the Cascade device. I do not know if I will survive, but I want you all to know something. He paused and took a deep breath. We came from a small blue world on the edge of the galaxy. We were nobody. We had nothing. And now we are about to change everything. Whatever happens next, remember that. Remember what we can do when we refuse to give up. Remember that we are human. He pushed the button. The Cascade device activated with a flash of light brighter than the Valorian sun. A wave of energy spread outward at the speed of light. Every ship within 3 light years went dark. Every weapon, every shield, every engine. All silent. All helpless. Jason Miller was never seen again. His ship was never recovered. But his sacrifice had given humanity something precious. A chance. The Cascade event changed everything. Every Valorian ship within 3 light years of their homeworld went dark. Weapons that could destroy planets became useless metal. Shields that could stop any attack vanished like smoke. Engines that could cross the galaxy fell silent. For 72 hours, the heart of the Dominion was defenseless. Admiral Daniel Hartley received the news on his flagship and immediately gave the order. Every Allied ship capable of faster-than-light travel would converge on the Valorian homeworld. This was their moment. This was their chance to end the war forever. The assault fleet was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history. Human ships flew alongside Karath vessels. Marathi cruisers formed up with Delphian destroyers. Ven scouts led the way through enemy space. They came from every corner of the galaxy, united by a common purpose. General Nicole Harper watched them gather and felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. This is it. she said to her staff. Everything we have fought for comes down to this. If we fail here, the Dominion will recover. They will rebuild their fleets. They will create new extinction weapons. And they will not stop until every last one of us is dead. She paused and looked at the tactical display. But if we succeed, we can end this war today. We can free the galaxy from 40,000 years of tyranny. We can build something new. Something better. The fleet jumped to hyperspace and emerged in the Valorian home system. The enemy ships were exactly where the sensors said they would be. Thousands of vessels floating dead in space. No power. No weapons. No hope. The Valorians had never imagined that such a thing was possible. Their homeworld had not been attacked in over 30,000 years. They had believed themselves invincible. They had been wrong, but the 72 hours were almost over. Even as the Allied fleet entered the system, the first Valorian ships began to come back online. Their systems rebooted. Their weapons powered up, their shields flickered back to life. We need to move fast, Hartley said. All ships, engage the enemy. Clear a path to the planet. The final battle of the war began. Captain Derek Shaw commanded the battleship Defiance during the assault. His ship was one of the New Horizon-class vessels, built with technology from every Allied species. It was the most powerful warship humanity had ever created. Shaw pushed his ship forward into the heart of the enemy formation. Valorian vessels that had recovered their power tried to stop him. He destroyed them one by one. His weapons tore through their shields. His armor deflected their attacks. He was unstoppable. Then a ground-based weapon fired from the planet's surface. The blast struck the Defiance on the port side. 200 crew members died instantly. The ship shook violently and began to list. Damage report, Shaw demanded. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. We have lost 3 engines, reported Lieutenant Grace Collins, his first officer. Shields are at 12%. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Can we still fight? Yes, sir. But we cannot take another hit like that. Shaw looked at his display. The weapon that had hit them was still active. It was blocking the path of the ground assault transports. If it was not destroyed, the Marines would never reach the surface. Target that weapon, Shaw ordered. Fire everything we have. The Defiance unleashed its full arsenal at the planetary defense installation. Missiles and energy beams and railgun rounds poured into the target. The weapon exploded in a ball of fire visible from orbit. The path was clear. The transports descended toward the planet's surface. General Harper personally led the ground assault. She had been a soldier for over 20 years. She had fought in every major battle of the war. And now she would see it through to the end. The fighting in the streets of the Valorian capital was brutal. The enemy knew they were fighting for their very existence. They showed a ferocity that they had not displayed in millennia. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a killing ground. Commander Allison Drake led the assault team that breached the final defenses around the Great Hall. She had survived the destruction of Kareth Prime. She had watched her friends die. She had fought in more battles than she could count. And now she was going to finish this. Her Marines advanced through the shattered remains of the outer walls. Valorian guards threw themselves at the humans with desperate courage. They were cut down without mercy. There was no room for hesitation. Not today. Drake reached the throne room first. The massive doors had been sealed, but her engineers blasted them open. She stepped through the smoke and debris with her weapon raised. High Sovereign Malthek sat alone on his throne. The bodies of his personal guard lay around him. They had died defending him to the last. But it had not been enough. The ancient Valorian looked at Drake with eyes that had seen 3,000 years of history. "You cannot do this," he said. His translator turned the hissing words into flat English. "We are the Dominion. We have ruled this galaxy since before your species learned to walk upright. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We have crushed 1,000 rebellions. We cannot be defeated by primitives." Drake lowered her weapon slightly. "And yet, here we are." Malthex was silent for a long moment. "Why do you fight?" he asked finally. "You could have surrendered. You could have served us as so many others have. You would have been safe. You would have been protected." Why did you choose death instead? Ah. Drake thought about everyone she had lost. She thought about Kareth Prime and New Geneva. She thought about Megan Torres and Jason Miller, and all the others who had given their lives for this moment. Because we would rather die free than live as slaves. Because our ancestors taught us that freedom is worth any price. Because that is who we are. She raised her weapon again, and because you made a mistake when you chose us as your enemy, she did not shoot him. Instead, she called for General Harper. The war needed to end properly, with a formal surrender witnessed by representatives of every allied species. Malthex surrendered his throne and his empire to General Harper in front of cameras that broadcast the moment across the galaxy. 40,000 years of Valorian dominance ended in that throne room, witnessed by billions who had never dared to dream this day would come. The Treaty of Earth was signed 6 months later. The Valorian Dominion was officially dissolved. In its place, the Galactic Federation was established. Every species would have equal representation, regardless of age or technological development. No species would ever be enslaved again. Admiral Hartley, now the most celebrated military figure in human history, spoke at the signing ceremony. We did not want this war. When those first ships appeared in our sky, we hoped for friendship. We hoped for peace. We hoped that we could find our place in the galaxy without violence. He paused and looked out at the representatives of dozens of species, but when they demanded our surrender, we had a choice. We could submit, or we could fight. And humans have never been very good at submitting. The audience laughed softly. Even some of the Valorian delegates managed small smiles. We lost so much in this war. So many good people who will never see this day. Their sacrifice is what made this moment possible. We must never forget them. President Scott Palmer, the new leader of the Terran Coalition, stepped forward to add the final words. The galaxy never expected humanity to retaliate. They thought we were too young, too weak, too primitive to fight back. They learned fast. He looked directly at the Valorian delegation, and they will never forget the lesson we taught them. Never threaten humanity. Never try to take our freedom. Because we will fight to the last breath. We will never surrender. We will never give up. That is our nature. That is our strength. And that is why we won this war. In the years that followed, humanity took its place among the great powers of the galaxy. The scars of the war remained. Monuments to the millions who had died stood on 100 worlds. The names of heroes were taught to children of every species, but something else remained as well, a reputation that would last for millennia. The other species of the galaxy had learned to respect humanity. Not because of fear, but because of what they had witnessed. They had seen a young species face impossible odds and refuse to break. They had seen courage and sacrifice beyond measure. They had seen what happens when you push humanity to the edge. Commander Allison Drake retired to a small farm on Earth. She lived quietly, tending her garden and watching the sky. Sometimes, she thought about all the battles she had fought. Sometimes she remembered the friends she had lost. Sometimes she wondered if it had all been worth it. Then she would look up at the stars and remember. She would remember the slaves who were now free. She would remember the children who would grow up without fear. She would remember the galaxy that was finally at peace, and she would smile, because in the end, that was why they had fought. Not for glory, not for power, not for revenge, but for the simple belief that every being in the galaxy deserved to be free. Humanity had proven that belief with blood and sacrifice. They had changed the galaxy forever, and they had shown everyone, from the mightiest empire to the smallest species, that the impossible was possible. All you had to do was refuse to give up.